All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Cinderfall Gaming. I hope you're all doing great. Today we are in for a special treat as we are going to be doing a review today of a playtesters review because all of us managed to playtest the game somehow. And thank you to Cubicle 7 for that. But we are going to do a playtesters review and give you our insights on the game for Age of Sigmar Soulbound role-playing game. And I am, of course, Luke, Mr. Dadhammer, and I'm joined today by two of my fellow playtesters for the game, Ash.
G'day, guys.
And Andrew.
Howdy all.
So I think the first thing we'll get into before we start talking about Soulbound a little bit is we're going to give each of our sort of experiences with role-playing games. Some of us have a lot more than others, and there's a big difference between the three of us, I think. But we'll start with Ash. You can go first, mate.
Yeah, cool. So when I sort of approached the playtest group about joining in, it was actually I had played I think 2 sessions of Dungeons and Dragons, and that was all. So I was like the complete fresh face, trying everything out. Seeing what this whole role playing game thing was even about. And so I think kind of that became my role in the playtest was, does this make sense for someone that has never done this before?
Yeah, certainly. And Andrew, you are the polar opposite of that.
Yeah, I've been doing role playing games since the 80s. Lots of different systems. I've also done. So I did some play testing previously for Dreamscard Press for some of their Pathfinder line. And most of the role-play experience I've got has been sort of locally with mates. I've done Dungeons & Dragons, obviously Pathfinder, the various 40k, Deathwatch, Rogue Trader, those ones. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, dabbled a little bit in 2D20, Shadowrun, Palladium, even some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle roleplay. That was cool when I was in high school. Yeah, so lots of roleplay stuff on this end.
I've not heard of like half of those words, so that's awesome.
Yeah. And so for me, I'm sort of sit somewhere in the middle. I'm not quite a couple of decades in this, but I've got a decade of mostly GMing under my belt. And definitely during the playtesting stuff, I took on the role of GM for most part. I originally started with Dark Heresy and Deathwatch, thinking that they were actually Warhammer books in a store, picking them up and not realizing what they were. And so from there, we got into all sorts of things from Dungeons & Dragons to Mutants and Masterminds, a lot of other Green Ronin games like the Fantasy Age stuff, Steamcraft, and a bunch of other things. And so, of course, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was my personal bread and butter. And I played, I think, every edition of that now, because I played 4th edition now, which is, of course, done by Cubicle 7 as well. And so, before we get into anything else, I think it's right to say hello to everyone in chat, and thanks for joining us, guys. Hope you're all doing great. We're going to have a Q&A at the end of after we go through the thing, so stick around for that. If you've got questions, when we're at the end, post them in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them of what we can. Just a note that we can give away the game, and we can talk about the game, but we can't talk about certain things like business side or anything like that. You can't ask us what's coming. We don't actually know, but so just those questions, they're not like they will not get answered.
Won't be solving anything by asking them.
Yeah.
No.
Is this going to come?
We'd like to know.
I don't know. Yeah, we'd like to know, but yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess the first thing to jump into is, well, first of all, what is Age of Sigmar Soulbound? What is it in the game? We'll go with Ash. You can chuck it up.
Yeah, sure. So Age of Sigmar Soulbound is a role-playing game. So I guess if for people that haven't done a role-playing game before, we might have a few of those in the chat because they're sort of Warhammer fans and not necessarily on that side of it. It's I like to think of it as like a shared narrative experience with a group of friends. So it's a really cool way of building like a story and engaging with your mates and sort of enjoying the more narrative side, whilst not having to think about the strategy side necessarily. Whilst there is still some of that to some of the combat and things like that. That's sort of what a role-playing game is, and Soulbound is a great example of that. It's run on a D6 pool-based system, so you're not using sort of weird-shaped dice. You're just using your regular Warhammer D6s. So everyone that's sort of in the chat or has played Warhammer before will have those lying around, I'm sure. And yeah, so I guess we can talk more about the mechanics later on, but that's kind of a brief summary of the idea of what Soulbound is.
Yeah, and we'll get into mechanics in a little bit, but I think the most important part is like the story behind a roleplay game. And as you've said, it's set in the Age of Sigmar universe that I would say many people in the chat would know. And if you don't know, we won't go too much into what Age of Sigmar setting is, because you can go read some fantastic Black Library fiction or pick up Age of Sigmar Soulbound, because there is a bunch of fantastic fiction along with some really amazing artwork. I will say probably my highlight of the entire book more than anything is the artwork within
it. Definitely. Yeah,
some amazing pieces of art in it.
I've gone and followed all of the Emmett posted the artists that were involved on his Twitter, so I've gone and followed all of those artists so I can keep track of what they're doing.
Yep. I believe I shared that as well, so you can go find either Imitation or at Dad Hammer Neo, and you'll see a link with all the artists involved that have Twitter with Soulbound.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too with Soulbound is for those people that are role players, it really has much more of a storyteller type feel than your classic D&D or Pathfinder stuff. A lot of the focus of the game is you as your character. Some of the other big role-play games can often get bogged down with the minutiae of number crunching and things like that. And while obviously there's a little bit of that, Soulbound is much more an immersive storytelling experience. So
which I think does suit the setting as well, because you can really get lost in the mortal realms if you give yourself the chance.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, without a doubt. So we've touched on the name, which is Age of Sigmar Soulbound. So, Andrew, did you want to give us a brief overview of what being Soulbound actually means?
Well, the Soulbound idea, the story, obviously when they were coming up with the system, they wanted some background as to why we would have these disparate racial groups and people alongside each other. So we go back into the history of the mortal realms. And during the Age of Myth, great heroes were bound together in order to protect the realm and drive back the evil minions of chaos, etc. And as the realm gates have opened and Sigmar has launched his crusade, and we have these bastion cities now being formed in the mortal realms again, a need has arisen for these great heroes once more. And what happens is, if you are a soulbound, part of your soul is literally bound to the souls of the other people in your group, and you are literally bound together as heroes and charged to defend the realms. And what that means, though, unless you're a Stormcast, because Stormcasts don't technically have souls in the same way that other people do. So you can play a soul.
They can't join the binding at least. They have souls, but they're claimed elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a difference. So because their soul is kind of tied up to the lightning and the anvil of apotheosis and stuff, they can't give it to other people the same way that the rest of the members of the party do. So yeah, it's a really cool way of both writing a mechanic to keep a group together, but also adding that another layer to the richness of the mortal realms. It was a really clever way of Cubicle 7 to make you function as a party, because you literally are in the head of each other.
Yeah. And it also reflects in some of the mechanics in the game. So the things like your Soulfire and your Doom are party mechanics. So if the party starts becoming disparate, you start finding Doom creeping into the world, and that causes it's great for the GM as well to create that kind of narrative push. So it gives you that sort of reason to make people be brawling in the streets, or like a Gloomspite invasion or whatever it is. It gives good excuses for that sort of thing.
Yeah, you literally got to, even if you don't really get on, say, your Caradron and your Witch Elf Hag don't really like each other very much, you're still charged with the same duty, which is to defend the mortal realms. And if you start to lose focus and focus on your own individual petty squabbles, then the doom increases and things get worse.
Yeah, and likewise, if your party performs admirably or achieves a great success in the mortal realms, or sort of drives back some chaos, you find that the soulfire of the party can be drawn upon more as well. So you can use this the soulfire mechanic to really boost up the strength of your squad when you're going into some of those bigger sort of more serious plot points, I guess.
Yeah. And also saving the lives of other party members.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, we've gone from Soulbound and what that is straight into mechanics. So we'll go into the mechanics part now, because I think Soulbound is pretty well explained there by Andrew. So mechanic-wise, Ash mentioned before, as he did, it is a D6 system, and a pooling system. So what that means is we take a amount of D6s equal to some various things within the game, and we roll them trying to hit a target number. This target number is needed to be achieved depending on the test. You might have, say, a 4(2) test. So this means you are needing to roll 4s, but you are needing to roll 2 of them at least in a dice pool. And these can vary in difference, and there's lots of different ways this changes throughout the game. You can have things like extended tests, which could be like a 4(20), which means you need to hit it 20 times. Over time, yes.
And it could be as a party as well. So for those ones as well, it might be that the one that they give an explanation of is if you're trying to land a sinking Caradron ship in the middle of the wilderness, you might have the captains trying to steer the ship. So he's doing a body a handling check, and then you have someone's trying to look out for a safe place to land, so they're doing a perception, like a sort of insight style awareness check, and you have that sort of like combined pool that then creates that success.
And you mentioned there, so you mentioned body. Probably one of the most interesting things I found about Soulbound is that it's got 3 stats. It's very stat light. There are 3 stats that govern everything in the game, and I believe I've got it right: body, mind, and soul.
Yep,
correct. Good. I've actually got it right. So those 3 stats then are sort of each skill. You've got a pile of skills in the game. Each skill then has a governing stat or characteristic, and you sort of go off that. So you're trying to make, say, a strength test. That's body. Or weapon skill, that's body.
Yep. So you might be making it might be, for instance, if you were trying to hold up a falling portcullis, you'd be making a body might, maybe a 4(2) check, and then that would become your required roll. So depending on what your value is for your body, and then any training you have in your skill of might, that creates your dice pool, and then you can sort of roll the dice and then use focus so focus is sort of an extra step that you can use to add pluses to the dice rolls that you've made.
And so on your basic roll, obviously, like we said, so you generate an amount of dice equal to your stat for whatever it is. So say you're rolling a body, you've got body 3. You have 3 dice in your pool. You then have a skill, and you can add dice to your pool with your skills. Depending on how many times you've taken that skill, it can add multiple dice. And then you have specializations, which allow you to change the roll of a dice by adding 1 to it, which is a really cool mechanic. I think when we first played it out, like the first test, we were like wondering what we were doing, and then you sort of roll it, and it's like, oh, this is really simple, but really like well done.
Yeah, it's quite elegant.
Yeah. For people that have actually played a lot of other role-play systems, it is kind of weird to only have those 3 stats. And I think I said on one of the comments on Twitter before, it's deceptively simple, because you look at it and you go, especially if you're used to D&D or something like that, where you have a lot more. You think, well, how can that one stat reflect so many things? But it's not really just the statistic, because depending on where you've put your training and things like that, or where your archetype places its skills, just because you've got a high mind, so you're intelligent, doesn't necessarily mean you've used that in the same way as you've grown as, say, the Battle Mage who's devoted the whole of his intelligence to spellcasting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot more nuance to it than you would think.
Yeah, without a doubt. I found when doing a lot of your characters and like just looking over the characters that you guys had built, it was really interesting just seeing all the different things, and like especially building the same character over and over again, which is something I did a lot of, just taking one archetype and building 20 different variations of it. The archetypes seem really rigid at first, and I guess we'll talk about them next. They do seem really rigid at first. However, I think there's a lot of sort of depth to the racial and archetype thing in the game.
Yeah, definitely. Like even just so today, I was building my my Battle Mage character, and I thought I would have spent maybe 6 hours today and another 6 hours yesterday just working on my Battle Mage to figure out all the different like combos that I could create and how I could help out the party and what was the best choice for the different spells and all that sort of thing. So there's definitely a lot there to people that enjoy that character building side of it. You've got a lot that you can play with to make it interesting.
And more so than I think a lot of the other games, you really are rewarded for making sure the party functions as a party. Like you, a lot of the times with some of the more traditional role play games like D&D and things like that, as long as someone can cast a heal at some point, you generally doesn't really matter. If someone hits things and someone can cast heal, you're pretty good. This really does reward you if everyone in the party can help each other out. And that applies not just to the skills and the stats, obviously, but that's where the soul fire and things like that come in as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's the next sort of mechanic to talk about as well is Doom and Soulfire. So we mentioned them a little bit earlier on. These are sort of very integral to the game, and especially as campaigns go on. Playing one-shots, you could almost sort of forget this ruling exists, depending on how long you're playing your one-shot for. But, playing a one-shot for 3 hours, it's probably not going to come up much. However, in the course of a campaign, this is going to be something that really starts to affect the characters and shows how and will affect the way you play your characters as well. Like, if you want to play a character who's not happy about being soulbound and has their own agenda, that's fine, but you got to be prepared for some bad things to happen.
Well, as I said, you might have the witch elf hag who generally is there with some nefarious agenda, but if that character doesn't actually gel and work with her teammates, then basically the doom goes up, and the encounters and the problems get exponentially harder until eventually the party can't cope and gets destroyed. So you have to work together. Yeah.
It's just such an interesting sort of mechanic, and like Soulfire is really cool in the opposite way. Working together really helps boost your Soulfire, which is something you can use sort of like, I would liken it to other things like Fortune or Fate in other systems, where it's sort of like your good dice.
Yeah, so there's like a number of different things that you can use the Soulfire for. So if there's a really like sort of a difficult test that you need to do, you can use it to maximize your successes. So you can make all of your dice pool count as sixes, or you can use it to like reroll as many dice as you like in a single test. You can use it to regain your spent metal. You can use it to recover your toughness, or like Andrew said, you can use it to cheat death. So you can take away a mortally wounded character and bring them back to life.
Yeah, the key though is you don't just take it. The party has to offer it.
Yeah.
If because you are literally drawing on the soul power of your party members, your friends, to perform these deeds. And you say, I want to use some soul fire to do X. And if the rest of the party agrees, excellent, off you go and you use it and you carry out the task. If the rest of the party doesn't agree, however, and this is, I think, one of the most interesting mechanics, is you can say, well, screw you, I'm taking it anyway. And what you're literally doing then is drawing on your compatriots' souls without their permission. And yeah, it still works, but then the doom instantly goes up by 1 point because you're breaking the rules of the heroes of the mortal realms. And it's interesting. I mean, if the party's working together, that shouldn't be an issue because you should be at a point where you can say, look, we really need this. Go use it. But you come back to those nefarious type characters. Caradron, who's just decided he just wants to get the money, he might decide, screw it, I'm using your soul.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because you'll have to be conscious for that to work as well.
Yeah,
you cannot give your soul while you are unconscious.
Yeah,
it has to be a willingly given thing. And yeah, it was one of the things that came up. Is like, no, you can't do it while you're unconscious because you can't willingly give your body while you're unconscious.
Yeah.
So it becomes dangerous, and like you might be like, I don't know, the last character standing and need to use that soul fire to save your party, and you're going to have to at that point, but it will increase the doom automatically because of that.
Yeah,
it's really cool mechanic.
Yeah, it is without a doubt my favorite part of the game. As a GM, looking to play on that with the party members. It's really interesting because it's like they stand there squabbling too much, like about a major decision they have to make, and you could increase the doom on them or lower their soul fire if the squabble turns into like a heated debate, and like that they start to break and fracture and have really different opinions.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that I think is really useful as well, just whilst we're talking about like as the DM, they've broken down in they've got a sort of a game masters section in the book. And in there, it talks about how to break down the threats that your party faces throughout the campaign. And they've got it divided into rumors, fears, and then threats. So you start out with sort of 3 or 4 rumors, which when your soul binding sort of starts out, you might hear about these through someone at the pub or someone that's like traveling with you or whatever it is. And then you escalate those to fears and then threats, and that's when you then act on them. So you sort of you've got in the back of your mind a number of rumors and a number of fears, and then the one active threat that you got to deal with, but that you got to go back to those other ones, and it makes it really interesting. And like for myself, because I'm planning on GMing a couple of games as well, like thinking about those makes it really easy to keep the party on track for what you want the story to be.
Yeah, you're not just your mission is not just go and kill that bad guy. There's always something else going on.
Yeah, it's like you've heard tell of like people disappearing in the streets, and at the same time there's an orc invasion on the like western front of the city, and at the same time you've got like starts like mushrooms popping up everywhere. It's like, all right, those could be one threat. It could be 3 different threats. We'll have to figure it out as we go, and we'll pick one to deal with to start out with.
Yeah, I think this game now, an interesting thing like about the characters is you aren't playing as just some grubs from the streets for the most part. Like you could choose to play some of the lower class characters like the Battle Mage or the Black Art Corsair and play that sort of lower setting. But for the most part, you are going to be playing like much more heroic characters. It's not like Warhammer Fantasy where you are playing like the grim and gritty backstreet characters. I would liken this much more to like the Deathwatch RPG, where you're playing as like elite Space Marines. Maybe not quite as far along, but you are definitely like you are heroes in your own right before the game even begins.
Yeah, you've been chosen to be a part of the Soulbound.
Like you're something special before this even started.
And if you enjoy the mechanics but want to play in that sort of lower fantasy sort of setting where you are a rat catcher or whatever it is, there is a setting in the game where you just start with less experience points, and you might have an increased doom immediately to start out with, and that just makes it a harder, like tougher game if you want to play that sort of on hard mode, I guess.
Yeah.
And I will say that like that was something that really interested me about the game. It seems to have had the thought of difficulty put into the game. There can be some roleplay games out there that when you get to certain levels, like you're just succeeding everything and nothing matters. Except that one time you fail and roll a 1. But I think regardless of how far you get along in Soulbound, you'll have challenges, and the GM will be able to provide challenges based on how far along you are.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, part of that too is the way that the mechanics actually work. A lot of the sort of as traditional role-playing games have had that problem that even first edition Dungeons and Dragons had, where you do get to a point where effectively you can't fail. Once you've hit that point, first edition D&D or AD, the second edition was probably the worst for that, with the way the attack system worked and THACO, for those the old farts like me. But in this system, because of the dice pool system, you can continue to increase things almost exponentially. So no matter how effective you think you are, it's very easy to have something that just negates it.
Yeah.
So, you might be a hero, but a bloodthirster standing in front of, a witch elf, the witch elf's in trouble.
Yeah, and especially as well, like with your tests, you can get to the point where you've got a dice pool of 10 dice, but then as the GM, you just say, okay, cool, you need 6 sixes on your 10 dice to make this a success, and that immediately becomes very, very difficult.
Yeah, and also the advantage and disadvantage system, where so if you've got advantage, then it becomes easier, but if you've got disadvantage, everything gets harder, and the numbers you require go up. So the situation is very easy to adapt.
Without a doubt. For those in chat who've joined us late, we will be doing a Q&A at the end, so please save questions for then, and we'll get to them. So if the chat keeps going past and you see anything, post your question again when we get to the Q&A, please. And you do have someone agreeing with you that THACO is broken like hell.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that THACO got real shit real quick.
I think the next thing to sort of go on is let's delve into the characters somewhat. I think the interesting thing about characters, and it was on purpose, it was quite clear that the game has been made to drag Age of Sigmar players to the role-playing game universe.
Yeah.
And it was a bit like, that's the reason why it's D6s, because every Age of Sigmar player should own D6s. If you don't, go buy some dice and stop using your friends. Stop being that guy who uses the other person's dice.
Or the store dice.
Or the store dice.
Yeah, I don't have a tape measure. I don't have any dice. Oh, can I use your models?
Don't be that guy. But it was a really important thing that they did in the game.
Make it accessible to everyone. Yeah.
Well, it's clever marketing. They're going to pull the RPG market. Of course, it's a new RPG, and RPGs are just likely to buy books because that's what we do. But it's also going to pull in those Sigmarites who may have never even looked at a role-play game before.
Yeah.
The background alone.
I think it did.
Yeah. I mean, the background alone in the book is some of the most detailed background we've had for the Mortal Realms. So even if you don't play the role play, you're going to want to buy this book.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It really pushes out the lore for the Great Parch, which is the original section. Sorry, I think I've got a bit of gain and bloody hell.
But yeah, it does push the lore for the Great Parch, like beyond where you get it, even in the core rulebook. I think the most information we've gotten about the Great Parch does come from that core rulebook, from my memory. Aside from all the sort of the Realm Gate Wars narrative, but yeah, that had so much in there, and then this is just like. I was blown away by the amount of detail that they gone into. Every single city, every single feature on the map gets spoken about, which is awesome.
Yeah, and the map itself, how good is that map?
Yeah. So good. Someone hire that map drawer.
Well, I believe they have. So one important thing to know about this game is that actual GW authors worked on the game and the lore. So the lore, unlike some other RPGs we've had from Warhammer in the past, where you've had things like Dark Heresy and Deathwatch and Black Crusade, they've all sort of been in their own. They've had to take a part of the galaxy unused, and it's never sort of been canon. This game has had actual like Black Library involvement and actual Games Workshop involvement, where the lore is like set in stone. Like this is using actual GW lore, and the stuff in the game is like the real deal, which makes it all the better because all of a sudden your tabletop game, the army you're playing in there, you can take one model out of that and he can actually be your character in this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very cool.
Just to shout out a few of the fantastic authors because they really did do some great work on the RPG. We've had Josh Reynolds, Nick Horth, who I'm a personal fan and favourite of, who I like a lot, C.L. Werner, just to name a few of some great authors. And there's many, many more. I can't stay on. Like, go read the credits for the authors, for the artists, for the designers, because there's so many people that helped put this game together, and it's just great to see something happen. So I think one last thing before we sort of, I guess, go into characters properly, and we just talked about it, is what are you hoping this does for Age of Sigmar? We'll go. Andrew?
I just think fresh blood. I mean, as much as we're going to draw Age of Sigmar players into RPGs, bringing people the other way, especially for guys like narrative gamers like you and I, the narrative players that we will get from this sort of experience will hopefully see the narrative scene explode a bit more. Some more narrative events, some more narrative players. That'd be great.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think it's going to work both ways because it is such a good system. I know we keep saying that, like, yes, we get to play it. We're not shilling out. Like, I do genuinely believe this is like one of the best role-playing game systems I've played in about 12 years of doing it.
I mean, the most feedback I can give is it's very accessible for people that don't know what they're doing.
That's actually like a really good point. Like, I actually put it up there with, like, I don't know, D&D 5th edition, how easy it is to learn the basics of.
I think it's easier than that.
Yeah, and well, that's like even better because D&D 5th edition is widely regarded as like one of the best things about it. Is probably it's a lot easier than other D&D editions to get into. But this really is a great game to like actually learn how to play role-playing games with, which I think is going to help see it succeed a lot more than it otherwise would.
Yeah. And as you say, even the mechanic system having it D6 based, and there are other D6 based RPGs out there. This isn't the only one, but given where they're wanting to draw their market from, it's just a sensible move. You know, as soon as you start saying you need D20s and D10s and D8s and you know D4s, caltrops, people start going, oh yeah, now there's add-ons and. But if you can market and say you've got most of the stuff you need, just get the book. That's sensible marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels very Warhammer as well. Like you grab a whole bunch of dice and roll them all at once. Like that feels like a Warhammer game, which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, anyway, on that little side note, back to characters. You are playing as characters, as we've said, you're playing as that higher sort of level character in the game. Sort of got a bit sidetracked there. Sorry, everyone. But you're playing as like higher level characters. However, they are characters that you're more than likely, for the most part, going to recognize from the tabletop game. This may sound at the basis restrictive. And if you just use the base ones, it somewhat could be, I guess, argued that, yes, it could be a little bit restrictive in that essence of that what your choices are. However, alongside the base characters, they also provide a archetype builder or converter, whatever you want to call it, that allows you to sometimes just as simple of, I want to play an elven battle mage, so you literally swap battle mage human for battle mage elf.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, Battle Mage Dwarden, if you want to go that, but then you're a Chaos Dwarf and you're turning to stone.
Not anymore.
You're just turning to non-existent. But...
We can't say that anymore. They're in the Wrath of Everchosen book.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we'll give them that one. But, so, I think rather than going through all the archetypes and sort of giving our opinions on all of them, that could take a long, long time, because there's quite a few of them. I'm going to go round, and everyone's going to get to pick 2 archetypes that they like the best.
Who gets to go first? Because I know we've got one that we're going to join.
Well, I'm going to let Andrew go first, because he can say it, because he's actually going to play it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be the Trade Pioneer. It adds a whole new level of fluff and background to the Mortal Realms. Essentially, this dude who, and this is one of the ones that does have the most flexibility, because you can basically pick whatever race you want. And you are essentially the frontiersman blazing trails across the mortal realms. And you can tailor that character any way you wish. So if you get to pick sort of any one range, any one melee weapon, you get, a kit, you get a loyal companion if you want.
Yeah.
The Celestial Ferret, yeah.
The Mustori for its technical name, but Celestial Ferret.
As it was previously known.
It's just it's so unique, and it's the one I think that it's the one thing that isn't familiar to the players of Age of Sigmar, because it is so new. But they just nailed the flavor of the Mortal Realms with it. Like it's not just the lip service to people that want to scratch build characters. It really does fit, and I think that's probably would have to be one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I think it sort of takes a bit of inspiration from some characters noted in Callus and Toll, especially like the dude inside the gem and Shev, the elf out of Callus and Toll. Yeah, I definitely think they were drawn for inspiration. It was no secret that one of the designers was reading a lot of AOS fiction when he was making the books, and they were some of the ones I suggested to him. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they are drawing some inspiration from those characters.
Yeah,
it also does. It feels like it reflects the state that the Age of Sigmar universe is in right now. It's in an expanding mercantile state. Like we still have pockets where chaos has taken over and it's still really, really bad. But there's cities that are flourishing. There's trade routes that have started to spark up, and these pioneers have to start sort of forging those paths between the different cities to so that the civilization can flourish.
Yeah.
And as a GM, it gives you the one best thing, because your party will do anything for that mystery, because goddamn, it's cute. If your party is not fighting the bad guy and you want them to fight the bad guy, just have him steal their story and they will come running.
You'd better not take that story off us.
Don't you touch my...
I will hunt you down, IRL.
Yeah.
Do you see my point?
We'll shop at your house. Don't touch my baby ferret.
All right, Ash, we'll let you have a crack at one next.
Yeah, cool. So I guess the first one that I'd want to pull out is one that it feels like a kind of a classic archetype for kind of the warrior class. So the Doomseeker has a bunch of really cool mechanics. The flavor that's been built into the mechanics of the character is that as he takes damage and as he starts to get wounded, he goes into his sort of his Barak Zadum, the Doom oath, where he his oath is that he will die in a glorious manner. So he gets even more powerful the more damage he's taken, and it just feels really good to swing a really big great axe and do 12 damage in one hit. Like, it's just fun. Like, anyone that's not played a warrior before in like a RPG setting, I reckon there's enough in just that mechanic just to have some fun with it, where you sort of run into the middle of the fray, take a bunch of damage, and then just mince everyone in around you. He's also lose your shit. He's also got access to some of the runes, so the Urgold runes, and that's it's a really interesting way of kind of customizing in like a magic item style way of your character. You can build him to be more defensive, you can build him to be more aggressive, and you can create some sort of really interesting combinations, also depending on what weapons you're using, because you're not limited to just the battle axe. You can go with the classic, like the one the model has, which is the dual wielding. You got a battle axe and a pick, or you can take two other melee weapons. It might be like a Wormslayer javelin and a throwing axe, because that's you were a rune son before you took the Doom Oath. So you can play around with that, and then there's different runes that sort of play into the different weapons better as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And for those of a more like those that are coming from like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, because obviously Cubicle 7 do that game as well, it only makes sense. And I've seen quite a few people coming over from like Fantasy Roleplay to AOS Roleplay now. It's your traditional Dwarf Slayer. Like, if you're looking for something to play as like what that traditional Dwarf Slayer was doing, that's this guy. He's a Slayer on a Doom Oath. As Ash said, generic Slayer.
It's very cool.
But
generic Slayer,
no less
but
cool.
With so much more. Yeah.
Generic Slayer is cool. So, anyway, for me, I think it's no shock what I'm going to pick as my first one. You'll be surprised to know that my favorite archetype is the Black Art Corsair.
I'm stunned.
In all honesty, though, like, I've had a lot of people like say that like he's great. Where the Trade Pioneer is sort of your jack of all trades for skills and sort of out of combat stuff, the Privateer is very much your jack of all trades for combat. He can do a lot more than a lot of the other races and archetypes can in combat, and be built to quite a lot of different varied sort of abilities. He has some cool mechanics as well, where he fights better against the big things because he's a monster hunter. So I know during some of our playtests, one of our other playtesters was managed to get like the killing blows on trolls by jumping on the back of it, and he just gets all these bonuses for like fighting against big things. It gets good.
Indiana Jones style.
Yeah. It was just such a cool archetype to see in action and like build as well, because there's just so much you can do with this archetype.
And the fact that you begged and pleaded for it to be included has no bearing on that.
Oh, no. I can't say that I threatened people that if this wasn't in the RPG, I would do things to their house, but I might have.
No one knows about the money that exchanged hands. It's all good.
No. For note, we are joking. I didn't threaten to burn anyone's house down, and I was not given any money or gave any money. But
no comment.
It was great to see it come in. I do think like it's an interesting sort of character, like, and he's one of the ones where I think Doom and Soulfire could be really interesting because they are very self-serving. While they're useful to the party, they are quite a self-serving sort of people. You're a dark elf pirate. Both of those things are self-serving individually to the highest extreme, and now you've put them together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it creates some really interesting inter-party dynamics and some really challenging sort of interactions around the Soulfire and the Doom.
Yes.
Yeah. But on the other part, he also gives your party a way to get into the underworld. So,
one way, yeah.
One way. There's some good characters for that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll pass it down. Andrew, your second pick?
Well, I played in one of our playtests, the Knight Incantor. And it's, of all the Stormcasters you can play, I just think the scope for the Incantor is much broader than the other Stormcast. Because she is a magic user, she doesn't have the level of wackiness, as in hittiness, that the other Stormcast have. And it does feel kind of weird to be a Stormcast in the party and standing at the back. But in terms of a background and putting that who your character is together, which is a really integral part of Soulbound. Who was this person before the Soul Forge? Who was this person before they were sent on this mission from Azir? How did what was a powerful magic user in a former life end up having their soul crammed into this machine and turned into a Stormcast? There's some great storytelling that can be had with the character, and it's just, I don't know, for me it has a little bit more flavour than some of the other Stormcasts.
Yeah, most certainly, without a doubt. I quite like the Incantor as well. It's interesting. You can make them relatively hitty for a wizard, which is another interesting way. Like Combat Mage, this is probably the way you go for a Combat Mage.
Yeah, for a wizard.
For a wizard. Like it's still a wizard. It'll never be as hitty as like some of the other things. But if you're wanting to have a wizard that gets up there and does stuff, you've also got the potential to do that as well. I mean, if you just like singing Queen with thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening at the top of your lungs while you shoot lightning bolts, this is the archetype for you.
Yeah.
Ash, your turn to pick a second one, mate.
Yeah. So the next one I'll pull out, sort of on the theme of the magic users, will be the Battle Mage. This is the one that I've been building between yesterday and today as my character, and the amount of flexibility that you have in choosing any of the spell laws, but also by being a human, you can choose an extra talent, and that can be from any of the talents that are available in the entire talent list. So again, like just because you're human, just because you're able to choose any of the spell laws, that gives you so much flexibility in what you want to sort of build into your character. I do also think that for me, the lore behind Battle Mages is pretty well developed, and it's very accessible. It's understandable. So the one that I've built is from a region of the Great Parch called Asperia, which is sort of where the Tzeentch influence was within the realm of Akshi, and that like immediately. As soon as you hear Tzeentch, it's like, okay, cool. So there was a lot of magic going on there. Anyway, Tzeentch has taken that, manipulated it. There might still be some Tzeentchian influence in the cities. This character's probably fought Tzeentchian sort of foes before. And then sort of going from there, when you then develop where you want to get the character in the story, like where it is right now, there's a lot of really cool sort of threads that you can pull on from the archetype itself to sort of build into that. So one of the things that you're able to choose is a loyal companion. So like how the trade pioneer can take a Mastori, you can do that as well as the Battle Mage, or you can choose a different companion. So it could be an alley cat, it could be a scryfish. It could be a bunch of different things, and you've got all these options that all just like combine together. And the one that I really sort of pulled a cord with me was the option of bringing a spirit guardian. So the idea that this battle mage has befriended a guardian of the realms and uses its sort of etheric power to help to aid it in battle is really interesting, and it intrigues me. And then that sort of has helped inform the spells that I've chosen as well. So yeah, it's been really fun to build that character.
No, without a doubt. And I think it's worth mentioning what a Mistori actually does for the party at this point. We've mentioned him a few times. He's actually really useful on top of being the cutest thing ever. He is a compass, a living compass. And that's an interesting thing like that they built into the realms really well. It's like little things like, how does a compass work in the mortal realms? It's not like like the mortal realms are effectively planes of existence. They don't have a north, south, east, and west, north and south pole like a compass would on Earth. However, what a Mistori does and a compass in the mortal realms does is it faces both coreward and rimward, which was like an interesting thing. Just like little tidbits like that made like the lore that little bit better and gave you like, that's how you find your way in the mortal realms. You're either going central or you're going to the edge.
And the Mistori too, regardless of what realm you're in, his fur immediately shifts to reflect what the celestial bodies above that realm are doing. So yeah, he is literally a star map.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's such a cool thing, and like I would recommend nearly every party should have one. Like he really seems like a useful tool.
Yeah, you won't get lost.
You can also take a talent which effectively does that same role. So if you didn't want to have a party with a small ferret that the GM could take hostage, you could do it that way. But yeah, it's just as easy to take a loyal companion and take the Mistori with you.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want that little ferret? It's adorable. For me,
anyone that hasn't seen the artwork for this needs to go and grab the book and check it out. It's
the trade point here artwork is amazing.
Yeah, all the archetype artworks are fantastic. For me, I'm gonna cheat a little and not just pick one, but actually pick a race that I found rather interesting while building characters for, and that is Caradron Overlords. For me, these guys are just so utterly customizable and interesting in how you can build them between the three archetypes now I've got to remember, it's Endrin Master, Aether Chemist, and Sky Rigger. Now, Caradron, there's so much scope for character building in this because they can all take different harnesses. They all can take different crafting skills. Aetherworks, crafting skills. There's a lot, and even like the most, I guess, bare bones one of it, which is the Sky Rigger, has the option to effectively turn into either an Endrin Rigger that we would recognize on the table or a Sky Warden. So you can make that KO combat character with a Sky Warden, or you can be another one of your mechanical, so a mechanical fighty character in the Endrin Rigger.
You can do Scotty from Star Trek.
I mean, and this is just an excuse for you to say, well, I want an airship to your GM.
It's also very interesting. So I know you mentioned that you can sort of build those three main archetypes, but also if you did want to build a Caradron of your own beginning, you can take the idea of their rig, which is the Caradron rig that they start out with, and you can build 6 sort of hard points into that rig. So, for example, you could have one of your hard points could be the balloon, and then that becomes your Aethercraft rig that sort of uses part of your power, and then you can then choose to build onto that how you wanted to. So you could have you could build a dirigible suit Engine Master with a giant hammer. Like that's something that you can build out of that engine rig. So it's really flexible.
And that's. Yeah, and while we're talking about the idea of the flying and things like that, one thing we didn't actually mention in terms of the rules was the zones and how they work. Yeah. Because unlike, especially people that are used to playing, map-based role play. The fact that everything is based into zones means that you really can run this without a map at all. And if you have someone that's flying, well, they're just in a separate zone. So they're not, 203.4, meters away. They're in zone 5, and zone 5 is 2 zones away from zone, 3. So therefore, you can't reach it with your pistols. You're going to have to take an action to come closer, to come down a zone to get within range. Abstract, yes, but in terms of that theatre of the mind style role play, it's just really clever.
Yeah, and it's also very easy for the GM to create like a quick sketch of a map that they want to battle in, and you can sort of understand the zones, and you can create some really interesting, sort of like you can have different types of hazards. So you could have a minor hazard or a major hazard, or like a deadly terrain kind of situation if there was like a crevasse that you had to avoid, and you can have those hazards in the zones, and then they become sort of a part of that battlefield.
Yeah, so your Caradron with his dirigible suit might be up in the sky, but that zone might be infested with, sky sharks or something. So he's got to be careful about being alone in that zone because no one else can reach that zone.
Yeah, and that's something as well that I found sort of reflected the Age of Sigmar game itself as well, because in Age of Sigmar, your scenery pieces are effectively zones of battle. So you might have a deadly piece of terrain, and that's difficult for you to walk on. You might have something that's entangling; it makes you slower, and that's effectively what these zones do as well. Is it's a little bit abstract when you look at it on the board, but when you're thinking about it, it feels very similar to Age of Sigmar as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. So we've sort of passed the archetype stuff here. The last sort of thing I want to talk about is we want to go through, like, I guess, some of our playtest games in particular, probably a couple that we all were involved in. I believe we were all involved in the same two. Yeah, we all played in the two together. So let's start with the first one, which was quite interesting. So I GM'd both of these encounters that we're going to talk about. In the first one, Andrew played, as he said, a Knight Incantor was the one he did in this, and you played... I can't actually remember what you played in the first one.
I was a Colonel Hunter.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. He was a bit slow. That was my way of excusing myself for not knowing what I was doing all the time.
Yes, hang at the back. I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm just going to pick this flower.
It's a pretty flower.
I mean, some highlights for me in this one were, and then our other party members at this point were a Blackout Corsair and a Knight Questor, who is a fantastic archetype and a great combat character.
Yes.
But this was a fun sort of session. This was the first one we actually did. I threw them into against some Gloomspite and a Troll at the end, which was nice and fun.
Yep.
The Gloomspite was interesting because eventually they started to do some damage eventually. Until Andrew at one point lightning bolted like 20 of them.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so the way that you can do that is there's some spells that you can cast into different zones. So that wasn't that one though with the lightning bolt, was that?
That was that one when they came in on your rear.
Lightning storm.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you hit the entire zone and immediately evaporate the grots that were in the way.
And I think someone gave me some... I spent some metal and someone gave me Sulfire, maybe. Some way, maximised it and just blew them to pieces. Yeah,
and it was in that point I found out that squigs are quite amazing.
Yeah, squigs are nasty. Yeah.
They had the Incantor reeling for a bit there.
That'll teach me to go out on my own, won't it?
Probably the other coolest member was our Knight Questor. So they're fighting on like a cliff edge, the shield bashing of the grots off the side of the cliff.
Yes, throwing the grots off the cliff, yeah.
If she wasn't killing them, the 100-foot drop off the side of a cliff after they've been shield bashed was.
Yeah. Yes.
But that was the one we were all trying to figure out the mechanics and stuff. So a lot of things like the spell casting. Oh, I wonder what this does. Oh, that was good.
But that was like a fun set, and I will say, like, that was our first session for like learning the mechanics. We were at that in a flash. Like, and to say how easy the game was, we picked it up pretty quick.
Yeah,
I think the biggest learning curve was understanding the sort of the dice pool compared to the difficulty numbers. So once you got over that, that's the entire game. Like that's all of the dice understanding that you need to have. Once you've got that down, it's like, okay, cool. So I'm rolling 6 dice in combat. I'm going to do probably a bunch of damage. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and like any role-playing game too, there's the nuances that you don't pick up straight away. The interaction between certain skills and traits and things like that, which comes with just practice.
Yeah.
But the basic mechanics you pick up really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, without a doubt. I think that encounter was just fun. We saw the Corsair in action as well. Like, he really does some work when he's fighting big stuff. He was pretty so-and-so fighting the Grots, but as soon as he got to get into that troll, he was doing some damage.
Yeah, for sure. It's difficult against the Grots because you can only sort of attack one at a time when you've just got one big weapon. Which was we had the Corsair in this one, didn't we?
Yeah.
But with your dual wielding, you can then sort of stab into multiple enemies as you divide your dice pool, which is interesting as well.
Yeah, and when the Troggoth did hit us, it hits like a truck, as you would expect from a Troggoth.
Yeah.
But the Corsair having all his weapons out was just like the whirling Ginsu knives, and it was very cool.
Yeah, the Corsair sort of fights, like, it is probably in your game, he is the most traditional rogue in the game, I would say.
Yeah.
Yes, the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah, he's your stereotypical rogue.
You can also build the Witch Elf into a rogue if you want to as well.
Yeah, she's a lot more fighty though than he is. Naturally,
she's like death by 1,000 cuts, and
yeah. Well, of course, there's all about planning that big strike. Really, is what I saw. Like, you sort of see he's like all these set up and then get that big hit off.
Yeah, because he wants the big note himself as the pirate, saying, "Look, I took down the Troggoth."
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
He didn't in this encounter because I believe he almost killed it, and then the Questor just sort of goes next to its head and just goes and die.
Yeah, yeah.
He did a lot of damage. It was close, but
he almost killed it, and the Questor just sort of comes along and, well, this thing's not fighting anymore.
But it was pretty good that she did, because the Corsair himself had taken a fair bashing.
Yes, I think another rock to the face would have sent him in the way of a Stormcast potentially.
Yes, one more hit and he was gone. So
yeah.
And then we did a second encounter. Which was you guys fighting some and a bit more investigation this time, because we did a lot of combat in our first one.
Yeah.
So the second one we did a lot more investigation sort of stuff, looking around, trying to find clues, using a lot of the outside of combat skills and abilities.
Yep.
And this one we had a smaller party. I believe it was Witch Elf. You played a Doomseeker Ash, and Andrew, you played the
Incantor again.
You played the Incantor again, yeah.
It wasn't the Witch Elf, it was the Hag.
Oh, yeah, so Hag Priestess, the buff one, because we've got a story for you. And so this one was sort of like the party sort of trying to figure out, we were using a lot of outside of combat skills and getting to see how they sort of work. And like we said, it is, once you know dice in this game, you know all dice. It is the same system regardless what you do, which is cool. Yeah. I'm not a big fan when there's 50 different ways you have to roll dice in a game.
Yeah. We did a few group tests, and we were doing like insights and investigations, sort of the classics of those, using the different attributes and understanding as well how the GM can change a test from being, it might be a mind, like for instance, if you were I'm trying to think of a good example, but like it might be, for instance, a mind channeling test for someone that's trying to detect magic, but it could be a mind intuition test for someone that's just got like a knack for knowing that something's not right. Yeah. And so you can combine the different sort of statistics.
And that one was good too for working out the synergies between different skills and amongst players. How different things from different people affect each other. That was good.
Yeah, for sure.
And definitely the combo we learnt was the Hag Priestess putting the Rune of Cain on a Doomseeker kills things.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Tasty.
I had this the big enemy there. I think you were fighting like a Chaos Sorcerer, if I remember correctly.
We were facing a Zangor on a disc.
Yes.
The Zangor Shaman.
Yeah, and then all that happened was that she went Rune of Cain, and the Doomseeker just leapt and chopped him in half. Which was cool. Like we saw like how the buffing sort of stacks and using these sort of more certain characters do it really well.
Yeah.
She was a really cool class though. I really like the Hag Priestess as a class. While the Witch Elf is very combat-y, she's very supporty.
I think that's definitely the way that I see all of the devotion-based classes. So you've got your Hag Priestess, you've got the Fire Slayers, the Rune Priest, you've got the Devoted of Sigmar, the Excelsior War Priest. All of those sort of in Age of Sigmar, they would be using prayers rather than spells. Those characters seem to do well when they're combined as a party because they do provide significant buffs using the metal sort of characteristic, which is how they spend those.
Yeah.
And
it's also it's part of what we were saying earlier too about the party working together. Because hearing that sort of story for the first time, you go, why the hell was a Doomseeker allowing a Witch Elf Hag to put a Rune of Cain on him? And it's like, well, because there are bigger concerns when you're a Soulbound.
Yeah, and we only played out the combat part of that, but then the fallout from that story in the combat could be that the Fire Slayer starts to sort of feel less associated with Grimnir. He might start feeling an affiliation for Cain or Marathi.
And that's an interesting. No, you go.
Yeah, potentially with that situation, of course, then the Doom may go up because Marathi's not exactly the person she claims to be.
Indeed.
And that's like an interesting thing about like the narrative of Age of Sigmar is that you are not bound to any one god. Like a Dwarden can worship Cain as much as an elf in Age of Sigmar. It'd be weird, but it can happen. Everyone can fall to chaos. We've seen that in the Warcry warbands, the models, how we've got elves, dwarves, ogres.
Yeah, for sure.
So that really opens up a lot too.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of that's harkening back to the early days of Warhammer when 3rd edition with the Realm of Chaos books, where if you had a Chaos champion, you had to roll up what race he was, and he could literally be any race. In those days, you could end up with a Slann champion of Chaos. So, it's that sort of thing in Sigmar as well now. Anybody can be corrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah, most certainly. So I think we've gone through quite a lot here, and we don't want to ramble on and spoil all the book for you. We just want to give you our brief overview. So we'll hit up for questions next. But most of all, thanks everyone for subscribing because we just hit 800 subscribers on the channel, which is fantastic. So we're getting there. 200 to go to that 1,000 milestone I want. But awesome. Thanks for subscribing, those people in chat that helped us get there. But I'm going to go back through the questions. If you have any questions, chuck them in chat and we will do our best to answer for you. And after question time sort of wraps up, we'll end it there. But we've probably got another half hour to 40 minutes before some of us need to go do other things. So the first question we got from Nash McCauley. Is there lore in the book? If so, is there enough to run the game from the book, or do you need AOS books or have prior knowledge of AOS lore? I'll leave this one to Andrew because you are the resident know-all about lore.
I think there's definitely enough in there to run the game as is. It gives you the background to the Mortal Realms, gives you specific details about the region around the Great Parch, and it gives you a fair bit of stuff about things outside of the Great Parch. So, if you wanted to start off and just have this, go for it. What you might want to do is, if you love it and you keep going, you might end up wanting to buy some of the Sigmar army books just to get a bit more background to different monsters as a GM. But yeah, definitely enough in there to go with as is.
Awesome. I think that answers that question pretty well. There's a ton of lore in there.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that you could say as well is if you did want to sort of supplement this book with something else, I know that there's going to be a bunch of supplements coming out from Cubicle 7, but you could always pick up the Warhammer Age of Sigmar core book as well, which again expands more of, it gives you more maps for some of the other realms. It gives you a bit more understanding of the sort of the foes that you could create, like NPCs for.
Yeah.
No. So next question's from Oliver Clark. Is the party setup comparable to the party from like Silver Tower or Shadows over Hammerhall, where a lot of characters are otherwise not really work together? And the answer for that one pretty much is as simple as yes. You're joined by a common goal, and that being Soulbound. If you go back to the start of the video, you'll hear our little chat about what being Soulbound is, and that sort of answers that one pretty easy.
Yeah, yes and no though, because the Silver Tower and Shadows over Hammerhall, you were able to play Chaos alongside Order, alongside sort of Destruction. So far, the Soulbound is only Order characters, so everyone has a common goal that they're against Chaos, Destruction, and Death. That's something that does bind the party aside from the soul binding.
Yeah, that's probably most notable. Is that yes, at the moment there is only Order characters. And I believe it's 3 cities, which includes a Darkland Coven, Scourge Privateer, Human, and then Choose Your Race. I believe that's there's only 4 of them, isn't there? Yeah.
2 humans, but
two different humans, but and then 2 different variations of Dark Elf.
Yep.
And Duarden.
And Duarden.
Yeah. And then you've also got Caradron Overlords, Fireslayers, Idoneth Deepkin, Sylvaneth, Stormcast.
And Daughters of Cain.
Yes.
Yeah. So all of the up to current day Order factions are represented in the book. I would definitely expect that in the near future we'll be able to see some more expansions when we get things like the Lumineth Realm Lords. I'm sure there'll be a whether it's an article or something that goes up on the Cubicle 7 website to add an extra archetype for that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. I'm going to play me a dude with a cow helmet, and I'm going to ring my cowbell across the mortal realms just to annoy everyone.
Moo.
Battle cattle to the rescue. So we've got another question from Zach Lee. Are you able to play the game without the Soulbound, Doom, and Soulfire mechanic?
So you can.
Soulfire goes away, doesn't it, if you have Stormcast automatically?
So the Soulfire is dependent on the party. The Doom as well. You can play it without it. I guess the way that you play without it is that the GM just does that sort of stuff in the background. So they might, like, if the entire party is about to die, they might give you some kind of sort of, I guess, Soulfire style thing where the party gets a sudden resurrection or whatever it is from their god. And likewise, it could be, rather than calling it Doom, the GM is just taking the role of sort of creating a bit more I guess, like untoward things going on in the realm that you're fighting in and creating these stories in. So you can definitely do it. And I think there is also, there might be a part of the core rules where it says if you want to play as a, like, without the Soulfire and Doom, without the soul binding, you can play as just a bunch of ragtags that meet in a bar. And I think there is, I believe I read that there was some mechanics in there.
Yeah, it's basically, the short answer is yes, you can. It depends on the style of game I think you want to play, because the game is tailored towards being the heroes of the realms. If you do want to go down that other route, then by all means you would simply take out those things, and you'd probably need to dial down some of the stats too, I think. But you could certainly do it.
Yeah. It'd be cool. There's some options in there, like, imagine pairing like a band of pirate elves would be quite cool, or some novices. You could play Warhammer Harry Potter with some battle mages.
You do the Duarden traveling to reclaim their homeland, a la the Hobbit.
Yeah, or even a Caradron airship group.
Yeah, Yeah, there's a lot of different options there, and like you're just building it narratively between your party anyway. So if that's the way that you want to play the game, go for it.
Yeah,
it's
I think
your hobby.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that the key here is, especially for, as I said earlier, for hardcore role players, this really does have a much more theatre of the mind in your head style play than a lot of the biggest RPGs at the moment. There was a system a number of years ago now called Blue Rose, which was marketed as romantic fantasy. And as much as it didn't do very well, because at the time a lot of the people D&Ding were, let's just say alpha male, the system was quite, and it reminds me a little bit of that, in that if you want to do something, if you want your character to do something, to act something, you just do it. It's not as much as, well, I can't do that because I don't have a dice for it or I don't have a stat for it. There's much more scope than that. And that's what I said earlier about it being deceptively simple. There's a lot more than you would realise in those numbers.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. There's like, there was a lot of times when like you guys were just asking, how do I do this order? And as a GM, I was just able to go, cool, this skill sounds about right.
Yeah.
Roll away.
Yeah, just do it.
So next question from Frecky Dougal. How do you guys best find for balancing encounters anyway? About like one champion, 2 warriors, and a few minions with their toughness about equal to the parties. So the first session I sort of winged. I guess this one is probably better for me to answer. I'm the one who did. So I found generally with like mobs, you want, of like lesser enemies, you want 2 or 3 depending on what enemy. You've got a plan for what your party has as well. Like Stormcast are innately more fighty than all the others. So you challenge Stormcast generally by putting them in harder fights. While, you might send 4 Grots against the Stormcast, or like I did, a Squig, a more elite enemy. You don't want to sort of send, the elite enemy against, say, the Scourge Privateer, because, unless it's bigger than him, obviously, but you get the point. You don't want the lesser character fighting the things. It's a lot about you as the GM sort of making sure that like you challenge your players, but you're not out there putting them in terrible fights that they're going to die from.
It's not like sort of D&D or Pathfinder where there is a challenge rating system as such, because there are lots of issues with those systems as it is, because none of those things take into account party composition and stuff like that. I think as Luke just said, like you have a bit of an idea like that. The Troggoth, the troll, is going to be a bit harder than your average grot, so probably don't put 5 of them in. It's that sort of thing.
Well, when you guys were fighting the Trog, it was the Night Questor, the Scourge Privateer, and the Kernoth Hunter fighting him. To sort of give you an idea of like you have those ones that the party needs to take down. But meanwhile, the Night Questor actually had to do with either you're dealing with a Squig, which is actually quite hard at one point, which was, I guess, more elite. Squigs are good. They punched pretty hard, and then he was fighting a horde. So, but meanwhile, on the other side, the Privateer was actually struggling against like a couple of Grots because he wasn't quite as fighty in that way. It's all about you'll find your feet as you do. I strongly recommend like starting low. As with any RPG, start an easy fight and then learn.
No one wins when the GM kills all of the characters in the first game. That's not fun. So I would definitely recommend starting with a what you would think would be less than enough, and then figure it out from there. It's definitely there's a nuance to it that will be dependent on your party's composition. Yeah,
and it's unlike. I mean, anyone who's an established role player would know the dreaded TPK, the total party kill. It's less likely, I think, to occur in this system simply because you are more invested in your character, and it's not a case of, well, I should be able to beat that guy because I'm level 4 and he's a CR2. If you're a Stormcast, Knight Azeroth or whatever, and there's a single Grot, you should be able to kill him. It's not saying, well, I'm level 4 and he's level 2. It's just, well, I'm a Stormcast and he's a Grot.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of simple.
Yeah, and I definitely see that they've also built into the Doom rating as well, where if your party decides to flee a battle, that can increase the Doom as well. But that might be something that is like in the forefront of your mind because you do want to keep your character alive, and there's always a way around that combat. You can always sort of narratively build out the story if you do need to flee.
Yeah, and that actually can be something for a GM to like pull on as well. Like if you want to increase the Doom and like you're trying to make this story seem more dangerous, all of a sudden they're fighting 30 clan rats and 10 stormvermin and like the party knows now they need to flee. You can use that to force your party to flee. Unless they're a bunch of nitwits and they die to 30 clan rats. But you can put your party in a situation like that to help speed that sort of thing up.
Yeah, and it also means your party needs to think twice before you're not like doing the murder hobo thing and just going, everybody in, kill all the clan rats. You have to go, if we engage in this and then we're forced to flee, the implications are going to be bad down the line.
Yeah.
So
maybe we need to be more sneaky about this. And
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a question from Autumn Gaming. How does the system award XP to players and how do they know where it's best to spend? So probably the most interesting thing is this is no levels in the game.
Yeah.
So it's a game that doesn't have a leveling system. You are awarded XP. Generally, 1 a session is generally what I think is the recommended thing. And XP for generally completing goals and stuff is the way to go.
Yeah. It's unlike sort of, kill a monster, get this X amount of XP. Every character, when you at the beginning of every session, has short-term goals. And you will also have long-term goals, which will cover, maybe 6 months of role-playing. But before each session, you might have a short-term goal. If you gain that short-term goal, your GM might award you an extra XP. If you complete the mission, you'll get 1 XP. It's things like that. But I think, like any role-play system, if the GM wants, they can say, "Here, have 5," because you're spending your XP. It's like some of the. It's not like a D&D system. You're actually spending your XP to put your skills and things up. So, it's up to the DM really, but 1 or 2 a session, I think, is probably standard.
Yeah. And it does feel like it's also worth noting as well. I think, from my understanding, it's a like a milestone style thing where the whole party will get the XP for the majority of things, apart from your individual goals. So it does mean that the characters between the party will, like, you won't have someone become OP.
Yeah,
which is always good. I'm a big fan of like milestone. I use it in most RPG systems I play now. A party grows as one, which lends it really good to like. At the current time, it's really hard to organize games online and get the games at the right time with people, or even just in general, it's hard in life. Milestones do a great job of, that guy who unfortunately missed 3 game sessions because his work rostered him on 3 Sundays in a row doesn't fall behind. Next Miniatures is asking, I was wondering if there's any book talking more about the Caradron Overlords as well. Overlords of the Iron Dragons, if you're not going to get the Battle Tome, is the way to go.
And there's a sequel to that now as well. I've bought it. I haven't finished reading it though.
Yeah, I've read that.
Can't remember the name of it. But if you get Overlords of the Iron Dragon.
Yeah. And obviously the Caradron Army book, if you really want to learn about it. But the Overlords of the Iron Dragon is a great read.
Yeah, very good.
So from Jakarta, in the playtesting, do you guys mess around with the total character creation as detailed in the GM section? If so, you find the balance in the group as a creative one. And someone literally answered Overlords of the Iron Dragon down below as well. So we didn't use any characters in the actual playtesting. However, I did do a lot of character building with the archetype creator. It balances pretty well with the other things. It sort of uses the same principles of what the actual archetypes are built up from. So the system in which the game created the archetypes we have now is the same system you're given to build with that character creation archetype builder.
Yeah, I think you come out just a little bit underpowered compared to the others. I think you get one less stat all up or something. But
Yeah.
look, it's negligible, and it really does balance out quite well and that's what you guys were saying before. If you want to play your nobody from the back streets of, one of the cities, then you can, and you're not going to have the multiple stats that say a Stormcast has, but that doesn't mean you can't be Soulbound, and it doesn't mean you can't be a hero. So
yeah. We've got a question from Theodore Kalamov. I really hope I said your name right, mate. How well do you think the game is suited for long-term play? Do you feel that the characters would be out of options relatively quickly without necessarily restricting EXP gain? Certainly not, because as we said, 1 or 2 XP is what you're expected to give, sort of a session. I think you've got quite a bit of scope for long-term play.
Yeah, and because it's not it's not 1-for-1 with the skills either, which is the other thing. When you're first doing it, but it gets exponentially harder to put another point in each skill. So you really got to think about where you're putting those skills.
And also there's, I think, over maybe 30 or 40 different talents that you can choose from. So if you find that you're starting to sort of reach the limits of what your Knight Questor can do in combat style sort of buffs, and you've already maxed out all of your melee based stuff, then you just maybe decide that your Knight Questor, maybe they've met a necromancer that they've been sort of fighting alongside as an NPC, and they decide that they're going to learn some death magic, and they're going to try and use that to discover the depths of the sort of the curse that's on the Stormcast, where they're not able to be reforged properly. So like you can definitely build into all the different aspects of the character from like wherever you started.
And it's a resource management thing as well. Because you're only getting 1 or 2 experience points a session, your option might be, well, I'm going to save up and get 3 and put 1 more point into awareness, or I'm going to spend 2 or 3 and get a new talent, but that's going to put back my skill. It's the resource expenditure is quite different to other systems. So I don't think in terms of running out of things to do. And bear in mind, even without any supplements that have come out, as Ash said, there's a lot of options. So, and presumably, I mean, Cubicle 7 will be supplements and things like that to add to it as well. So,
yeah, without a doubt. And so we've got another question from Zach Lee. From your experience, Andrew and Luke, is there enough within the mechanics to create additional homebrewing? Does the game's mechanics lend well to homebrewing? And the answer is yes. I mean, it's got a homebrewing machine set up in the core rules of the game with the archetype builder.
Yeah. In terms of the homebrew stuff, I mean, adding rules and stuff, I actually think it's going to be one of the easiest systems to do that with, because everything's based around the one basic mechanic. If you want to add, a couple of different skills, if you want to say split awareness into, say, old school D&D with listening and looking, you could. It's really simple. The system itself is, as I said, quite basic to start with, but deceptively simple. You could easily add stuff with a homebrew setting or system.
Yeah. I mean, I'm already working on some homebrew rules for some airships. So
I'm pretty keen to homebrew my own spells when I start leveling up as well.
Yeah. Homebrewing, because everything in the game is so like bolt on, it just lends itself well.
Yeah.
We've got another question here from Murray S. Wood. How tight are you going to have to GM? Because it sounds like Slayers who can simply demand Soulfire to not die are a power gamer's wet dream, and that's where Doom comes into it. Because if they can keep doing it, and you just keep raising that Doom.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily get the Soulfire back, so they can't do it infinitely.
Yeah, and every time they're using it, their Doom's going up, and it can just get worse and worse and worse.
You also might decide that because that Slayer has broken their Doom oath, that you might increase Doom more than once if they keep using their Soulfire for that purpose, because that's against that character. So, you can definitely sort of play against that if you need to.
Next encounter, instead of being, 2 clan rats, it's, a clan molder, packmaster, and 4 rat ogres. That's the sort of impact Doom can have.
Or like, you've ventured out of the city and the Fire Slayer's done all of these sort of heroic deeds and not died and come back to the city, and your NPCs that you grew to love and know have been captured, or you can have all these different sort of aspects of Doom that comes into
hanging
the game.
from a crucifix at the town gate because the town's erupted in revolt. Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah.
It lends itself really well. So I think we're out of questions now.
Awesome.
But if anyone has any last questions, now is your chance to ask them before we sign off. So I think while we're waiting for any more questions, if there will be any more, I will be running on the Sinful Gaming page a Let's Play. So both Ash and Andrew will be featuring in that, as well as some other guests. We'll announce them all in due time. But we'll have an actual game stream. Should go for about 8 sessions, I reckon. All things hoping that it goes to plan, but that should be the plan for that. And we'll be using some home-brewed rules and a bunch of different custom things in that I've built up, and my own setting for the Mortal Realms. And I do believe also a good friend of ours and one of our fellow playtesters, Charlotte Hamilton, is doing one on her Foxfire Twitch stream.
Yep.
And I would have no doubt that Garblag Games will probably put something out as well soon.
Yep.
But if there's no more questions, then anyone, now's your chance to post them if you have questions. So last question is, when is the RPG stream actually starting? So the one we're starting is starting 2 weeks today. So what was the date again? I think... Give me a sec. I will double check my notes for the actual date. 30th of May will be the first one. And we'll hopefully be doing a live stream just like this, because this has seemed to work and my live stream's been playing up like hell lately.
Yeah, this has been better than the last couple. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least we didn't have a dog barking a lot in this one.
Yeah, and the cops showing up.
Yeah, that was an interesting last stream. But anyway, I think it's time for us to sign off. If there's no more questions, guys, we're going to sign off now. This has been great, just being able to share a bit of knowledge from you. You can always contact me about anything from the RPG and ask anything about some experiences with it at DadHammondNeo on Twitter. You can find me on Sinful Gaming on Facebook or in our Discord server. Also Sinful Gaming on Instagram. Actually, if anyone wants to get in contact from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Ash_McEwen on Twitter. I'm always happy to chat Warhams. That's the entire purpose of that Twitter. So yeah, jump on there.
Yeah, and Andrew?
I am the real GoTrek on Twitter. You can find me on there for obvious reasons.
Because of your mohawk.
That's exactly right, yes.
Yeah, definitely the mohawk. But that's all from us. Thank you all for coming and joining. This has been a great lot of fun. And we hope to see you in a couple of weeks when we start our Let's Play stream.
Yeah, get keen, folks.
Yep.
So we'll see you all then. Ciao for now, everyone. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.